Nezha,
All right.
Nezha,
So
this was your
before we talk
pick.
about this one, I don't remember where. I probably will never remember where. I read some amazing reviews about this movie. They were talking about how the CGI was absolutely stunning, which it was, and they were talking about how this story was like. I'm not even sure. I really don't. I read some really good reviews about this movie. That's why I picked it. I hadn't seen it before. Um, I'll have you start on this one just because I want to hear what your opinion is because I feel like we're gonna have differing
Um,
opinions.
yeah, so what the hell, man? This this was Chris's pick for this week, Nezha, and that's spelled Nez space or sorry Ne space Zha, I believe. Is
I thought it was
how you
one
can
word.
find it on Netflix. I think it's I don't know, it's weird. It's like the title is one word, but the spelling is different. So
Oh, interesting.
Nezha.
Okay.
This movie was produced by an Asian studio. This
Yeah, I
was
believe it's
produced.
Chinese.
Oh, Chinese. Okay,
I
this was
believe
produced
so.
by a Chinese studio. Um, the story of Ne Zha, which I did not know this until I kind of looked it up because I just wondered what the heck was going on with the story. So we'll get into this, but Ne Zha is a big cultural reference. It's a story, kind of a traditional story in, I guess, China. See where it is, but this one is interesting because immediately the first thing you're going to notice with this movie is that it's dubbed over. So all the animation and everything was done for somebody who was not speaking English. And then it's weird again because the vocals, so what you're hearing and what's on the subtitles is
Dude,
off.
yeah, I noticed. I had to turn off the subtitles. I was like, "This is terrible.
What
It's
the
almost
hell? Like
completely wrong."
why would they not just have someone rewrite the subtitles based on what they said? I don't understand it. It's like maybe they gave them a preliminary script and then they wrote the subtitles based off that and then
Yeah.
they changed the script.
So Nezha
Dude,
is
that was
the
driving me nuts.
Nezha is the protection deity of Chinese folk religion.
Gotcha. Um,
So this is obviously like has religious uh, history to it. This is probably a
right.
very important film to. I love that all you guys saw with me just toss my laptop. There's don't worry, it's fine. Um, I feel like the movie has cultural significance, and maybe that's where the reviews were coming from. We're obviously viewing this from a Western cultural point of view, and maybe in an Eastern mindset, where this is significant to their history and to their culture. Maybe this movie was something more significant. It is it is a very different movie than the normal stuff that you're going to see on Netflix for what is within our region. I think that is the easiest way to put it. Um, but you're right, the subtitles
Yeah,
were completely wrong, which made
yeah,
it
that
difficult.
threw me off. Like
Yeah,
that seemed lazy. Like
it
why just
did. Yeah.
fix it before you put it out there because it was throwing me off. And look, that immediately when you're watching a movie, I really don't mind subtitles. I actually really like a lot of movies that have subtitles. But when you're watching a movie that is either done in another language and then dubbed into English, or you're hearing them speak in another language that you are not fluent in, and you're just reading the subtitles, you automatically, I think it takes something away from the movie because you're not getting what the director was going for when they
Hmm.
picked the roles for those characters.
Yeah,
Like the
it's true.
voices for the characters when you're watching this movie are not the voices that were picked. So
Right.
it's almost like it's not fair to the movie to pick these people because that's probably not the sound or the idea that the
Right.
director had in mind when they made this movie. They cast people to be the voice actors for this movie, and then I don't know if they cast the
Mhm.
same people to do it in English or if it's a different studio that takes it or if Netflix has people that do it. I have no idea.
And
But
when I saw the trailers for it, because I picked this based off of the trailer. I saw the trailer after I read the reviews, and I saw the trailer in Chinese, and I'm not sure what dialect it was, but it was definitely a Chinese dialect of some kind. and I feel like the acting was stronger, and I don't know what they were saying. Um, I mean,
Yeah,
it
I
is definitely
almost
dubbed over with like I would say B-rated actors, you know.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. The voice acting was not great in this movie at all.
Right.
I would have actually, I would have rather watched this movie, and I guess I still could. I'm not going to, but I would have rather watched this movie and probably would have ended up reviewing it in a better light if it had just been in a different language
Hmm.
and I was just reading the subtitles in English.
Yeah, like
Because I
we can
really
watch
think
It
it,
Man. If we can watch It Man, we can watch Nezha in,
exactly,
you know.
exactly. I love it, man. All like five of them that there are now. It's insane. But yeah, Nezha is interesting because the story itself that they're basing it off of is nuts.
It's
So the
convoluted.
story,
Yeah.
yeah, it's complicated, and it's like all these old gods or these old deities. The stories are always crazy, like any of these like Nordic gods. It's always these nuts
Hmm.
stories, and you're kind of thrown into
And
that.
you have to
But
kind of just accept what they're telling, what they're throwing at you. You know, like
this movie, it just felt so random,
yeah.
and I don't know if that's because I didn't grow up hearing that story, but basically, so okay, so there's a pearl.
Mm.
There's like a pearl that holds within it like the yin and yang pearls, like the
Yeah,
good and the
spirit
bad.
and chaos.
Right. And so when that is opened in the beginning, it's like spread out and like the Neja's mom gets pregnant and she's pregnant for like some long period of
I think
time.
she was pregnant for 3 years.
She was pregnant for 3 years and then the kid only had like 3 years to live or something like that.
Yeah.
Like this, so what we're doing right now, this is how you're gonna feel when you watch this
Hmm.
movie if you haven't seen it. And we'll talk about some of the positive points of it too here in a second, but understand that it is really hard to
It
follow.
is a convoluted film that is probably again only convoluted because we don't understand the story that is probably has some significant cultural ties to to China. A lot of it's just not gonna translate well.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say this would be like this story of Nezha is basically like the Chinese Captain America. Like basically you're looking at like kind of a national like traditional story that's kind of like deeply rooted and brought up into cartoons or whatever.
Hmm.
It's kind of if Captain America was like Jesus. So if it was like Jesus Captain America. And if that sounds confusing, that's basically how I felt throughout this entire movie. And the thing is, like you said, there's no prepping you for this.
No, it
Like
jumps right in.
they basically act like they could not care less if you understand this movie or not, but they're gonna throw it at you, and it jumps right in. It moves
Yeah.
quick, so if you're gonna try to watch this one, you better have your brain on. You better pay attention because you're gonna miss a lot.
Yeah, and I feel
Um,
like the fastest point of the movie is the exposition. It's the first like 10 or 15 minutes.
yeah,
Like after that, it kind of like okay, everything we just saw, I just have to accept. But
right.
for the first 10 or 15 minutes, they are just throwing all sorts of just facts that you just have to know. Like there's two pearls and there's 12 or 11 gods. The fat guy is going to be one only if he can make sure that one of the pearls is put into the right baby, but it gets put into the wrong baby after it's
There's dragons. All of a sudden, you're at the bottom of the ocean, and
yeah.
there's dragons who are like protecting some gate of monsters that never gets unlocked, which
I
is
mean,
surprising. I thought for sure.
it is very convoluted. It is what like it is
Yeah,
definitely a story that has. I think I think the issue is that there's more to it, and there's not enough time in a movie to explain it all. It's just they're throwing all of this mythology at you that you either understand or you don't. And
dude.
so yeah,
If you can make it through the what are the things called like the studio animations that are like right before the movie where they're like it'll be some little thing and then their logo will pop up. You know what I mean?
oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
like the
I'm
little
not
like
sure.
like the little studio
You're talking
ads
about the
that come on in the
oranges.
beginning. Yeah, what the hell, man?
That was
Like you,
dark.
dude, that
He just
was
electrocuted
it.
the entire audience for not
They
liking
just
their music.
we just so basically you're gonna sit down to watch this movie. You're gonna see a mass murder
Yep.
of about 50 oranges that are alive, and then the movie's just gonna start. And you don't even have time
Yep.
to catch up from that. And then you're watching some dude flying on a pig that sounds very questionable as it's flying around.
Yep.
Like yeah, the whole thing is they throw a lot at you, man. They throw a lot at you. Yeah, I think I think that there's a big cultural gap in this movie. I don't know. I can't say for sure that Ne Zha is a story that people in China are more familiar with than here. I would imagine they have to be, at least a little bit more familiar. But I kind of felt like I was one step behind this movie the whole time. The movie started and I didn't even have time to like fathom the fact that the subtitles didn't match what the people were saying before all of a sudden the entire plot was thrown at you in like 5 minutes. You have to figure the whole thing out, and they just keep going throughout the whole movie. They introduce characters really rapidly. Um, Also, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or not, but the movie was kind of gross, and I
Yes,
think
yes.
like maybe again, maybe that's just like a sort of a cultural difference, but like you're seeing people pee and you're seeing like people snot, and it's like okay, it's a kids movie, yes, and there's going to be some of that grossness, but there was a lot in this
Mhm.
one that I felt like was kind of nasty.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's funny because DreamWorks does a lot of that same kind of humor, and I think that's where
right,
DreamWorks and Disney kind of butt heads, and kind of I think that's why Disney is so usually considered so much better than DreamWorks, because like Shrek did it a lot, and we love those
right, like
movies.
Maleficent's not pulling earwax candles out
Right,
and like
exactly,
setting the
or
tone.
burping
Yeah,
or farting, it's.
right, right.
But you're right. This movie did do a lot of it, and it's weird because it reminded me a lot of Kung Fu Panda.
Oh, dude, I was gonna say that. I
Yeah,
was gonna say that. I got that vibe too. The animation style, big time, was Kung Fu Panda.
yeah.
It was like, because
But like
it was
Kung
kind
Fu
of.
Panda mixed with anime, it was like
It's
if we're
like if Kung Fu Panda, if the director of that movie was doing acid and made a movie, this is what it would turn out to be.
yeah,
Like this was not. This was Kung Fu Panda, but like on some sort of a drug.
yeah.
It was not. It was not as easy to follow, but it was similar in the like the style and
Now
the kind of the story.
if we're gonna talk about let's talk about what did work for the movie, and I think the number one thing is the CGI was incredible.
Dude, was it phenomenal or what?
It was
If you want to see,
unbelievable.
so that had to be painstaking
Oh
to
yeah,
put that kind of detail into a movie. Every blade of grass,
yeah.
every like drop of water. And you know what? I felt like there were points in this movie or scenes in this movie where they only put them in there because it was like the studio like flexing and like
Oh yeah.
strutting their ability to like
You could
animate.
see every water droplet when those tornadoes are
Everything,
being created. Like
everything.
it was amazing.
I did notice that immediately. The animation in this movie is phenomenal,
Yeah.
and it's a little different than like a Pixar animation kind of thing. Like there was a lot of hype about like Toy Story 4 and how the detail in everyone's
Hmm.
clothing was there, and it's not quite at that level,
There's a
but it
fly.
just felt like oh, lovely. Dude, he's trying to be on the podcast. This week's
Yeah.
guest,
This week's
a
guest.
fly, a fly in Chris's room.
Yeah.
But dude, the animation in this movie, you're right, was insane. It
Yeah.
it felt like I wonder how long it took them to make this movie. Like I wonder how long this movie
Oh.
was in production
So
because every detail.
yeah. So before I got into film school, I was actually into 3D animation from ninth grade until my second or third year of college. And so I did animation for a long time, and I know the amount of effort that it takes to make just a single minute. Um, I mean, it takes hours and hours and hours to render just scenes. Um, like I know that it took 24 hours to make I think 30 seconds of Golem in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I believe
Just to
that.
render that, they just had to leave the computers running, and if there was an error, they would have to do it again and leave it for that night, and that means that they're now behind 24 hours. So the amount of work and effort that has to go into now, I'm sure since I did 3D and now there's probably programs and code that helps. Particles when I was working in 3D, creating particles of water and smoke and all that was probably way more complicated than it is now. Not to take away from the amount of effort, but I feel like it's a lot more streamlined and it's probably a little more intuitive as opposed to what it used to be. Because I quit 3D when ZBrush was introduced, and I don't know if you know what that is, but
Nope.
ZBrush is
Mhm.
you're basically sculpting. You there's a bunch of tools and you can pull clay, and you're literally working with three-dimensional clay, and you can add bumps, and it's just I had to work with like the basic cube, and I had to build off of that. Whereas now you can create some incredible organic shapes with like a much less effort. But anyways, all that is to say that the 3D really blew me away because I'm seeing it from
It
a
was
point of view
phenomenal.
where I know the amount of effort that it took. So to the CGI artist who did Nezha, wow, like my like
Yeah,
hat off to you because
this is a huge testament to the studio and I guess to Chinese filmmaking, their animation credit or their animation ability because that movie and if you're listen if you're on the edge about even considering watching this if you're an anime fan or if you're and it's not an anime
it's
but
not.
if you're an anime fan or if you're into like kind of kung fu type movies, it's interesting. But one thing you should at least watch it for a little bit just to see the animation on
Mm-hmm.
this movie because the quality of it is unbelievable.
Yeah,
And it does definitely feel like this whole thing was like an animation studio's like uh, presentation at the end of a course or something. Like they definitely put scenes in there where it's not doing anything for the story. It's sort of just
yeah,
like, okay, this is beautiful, like this is phenomenal, but like what are we doing? And some of the stuff drags on a
like
little
with the
long.
painting scene like that.
The painting scene
Yeah,
and some of the fighting too. The
yeah.
fighting was, dude, the fighting was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask you that, like, because like the CGI aside, the and the story, like I don't, again, I think from a Western civilization point of view, it's going to be hard for us to appreciate the story, but the battle scenes were they were epic.
Dude, they
Like they
were
were
really
really
epic.
cool to watch. Like
Hell
if you
yeah.
only watched the battle scenes, and when I was in 3D, they would throw up on the screen all the time, like look at this scene that this movie did over in Thailand, and we would analyze the scene and like have to appreciate what was being put on screen. I think this is one of those things where if I was a teacher, showing my class work in a 3D animation class, I would absolutely throw one of the fight scenes up on the big screen because it was incredible.
It almost felt like you were watching a video game or
Yeah,
something. Like it was, and they last a long time. That's something that they don't shy away from the combat in this
no,
movie at all. Like
it
this is a
almost
pretty
felt like it went
action-packed
on
movie.
for a little too long for me.
Yeah, have you ever seen the movie The Raid, Raid Redemption?
Yes, yes, I have. I've seen that. Yeah,
It's it's kind of like that where the fight scenes start to stress you out because they're so
yeah,
long. Like you're
yeah.
just hoping
Because he's
it'll
just
end.
fighting
Like
his
you're
way to the top of the building. You're like,
yes,
okay, come
yes,
on,
and you're like,
just zip
please, yeah,
line.
you're like, please, one of you just lose or win or something. But the fight scenes in this movie were pretty intense.
Yes.
It's for a younger audience than us, I'm sure. And it took me, I didn't watch it all at once, so I sat down and started watching it. Kind of got away from it, came back, finished it off. But if you're gonna watch this movie for nothing else, give it a shot just so you can see the animation and just so you know that there's real competitors out there as far as
Oh
giving,
yeah.
Pixar, DreamWorks, these big animation studios, giving them a run for their money
Yeah.
because they're coming up. If they could just get their story right and get the character development a little bit better, that would have been a phenomenal
Yeah.
movie.
And
But
there are some touching moments in the film. There are some moments where, there's emotion and, they make you feel for the characters. But then there are moments that take you out of the story, like, some of the gross out moments and stuff like that.
yeah, and
It's
dude,
just
it's
kind of
just
like,
such a
okay,
mistake. It's
yeah.
just so lazy to do what they did with the voice acting and with
Hmm.
the subtitles. Like you're gonna spend all of that painstaking effort to create this movie, to do the animation, to get it out there, get it finished, and you can't spend a little bit more time getting the subtitles right?
Hmm.
Like, dude, you and I, in the length of this podcast, somebody probably could have gone through and written the words that they actually said throughout that movie.
Yeah.
It's like, come on,
Or
how do you
corrected
mess
it. Yeah.
something like that up? But maybe they, this probably, not probably, I mean, it's not even in English. This movie is not for an American audience.
No.
It's for an Asian audience, and it's got an Asian traditional, like a Chinese traditional story, traditional Chinese story, and then they put it over here on Netflix, so we can watch it. But dude, the reviews on this thing, I mean, again, this thing killed it. Critic score got an 88%, and audience score got a 98%
Yeah.
on Rotten Tomatoes. So again, take everything on Rotten Tomatoes with a grain of salt, but this movie did itself a disservice in. I say that all the time, but it did itself a huge disservice in not either just leaving the voice actors out of it or spending a little more money or taking a little longer to pick better actors and actresses to do the voice acting for this
I agree with you
because
there.
the voice acting
Yeah.
really took me out of it, and the mismatched subtitles was just lazy to me. That's
Hmm.
just lazy, you know. It just fix that. Somebody's got to
Now,
fix that. And
I'm not sure that the subtitles is controlled by the movie. I feel like there's entire companies that are dedicated to just doing this. Like I think Netflix pays a company to do the subtitles for their films, and so I don't think that's necessarily. I could be wrong, um, because
all
you
I
know, like
know is
at
if
the
I
end of a
was,
movie, it'll say closed captioning provided by.
that's true.
So
All
I
I
don't
know
know
is
if that's the movie or not.
if I was that studio that put in that much effort to make a movie like that and animate it as well as they did, and then the entire Western market sees it with mismatched subtitles and kind of poor voice acting, I'd be
Oh
pissed.
yeah,
And I probably would do something to fix that. So maybe that's kind of the you know, it's not Pixar. Sorry, man. And you know, no offense to that studio. Obviously, it was phenomenally done, but it's not Pixar, man. There was a little bit of something lacking there. But
yeah, and
if that's what's
that's
coming out of if that's what's coming out of these Chinese animation studios, they've got some real
yeah, yeah.
talent, and some
And so
serious potential.
you're right that it's not Pixar, but that's not a blow at the artists. That is something that is lacking on the directing and the storytelling side, not in
Right.
the talent of the animation studio, because the animation studio did incredible. Um,
I have
the
nothing bad
character
to say
design was
about the
awesome too.
animation of this movie. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I really liked both of the characters. Like I love Kingdom Hearts, and that other guy I can't pronounce his name, so I don't even want to like
The
do
dragon guy.
disservice. Yeah, um, he totally reminded me of Riku, and like his like white hair,
Yeah.
just blonde or like brooding. And but like when Nezha turns into his like his ultimate form, he looked badass.
Yeah,
Like
when he goes like Super Saiyan.
yeah, basically yeah. And then like all of his hands come out, and like that battle sequence really was, I feel like, what the rest of the movie should have felt like. I did think that the world inside the painting was amazingly done. It was beautiful and so much detail. Um, yeah, I think it really just comes down to the storytelling was just not quite there. The moments where they kind of gross out the audience, and maybe it is a cultural thing because they might say that our movies are too violent. Like it could just be West versus the East kind of thing. But there are moments that kind of take you out of the story. There's also moments where like at the end when he's basically about to die, and he finds out that his dad sacrificed himself for his son, even though his son's a demon. And he finds out that he's got the scroll in his pocket, and he rips it up, and you're like, oh man. And he's just and he tells him like, it's my birthday, no crying. And he's crying while he's saying that. Like that's an emotional moment that I couldn't
It
help but
is.
connect with the character. And when he's trying to save the village, and he's playing with the kid and the new superhero guy, and he tells him like, you're my only friend. And like there's like, we can all relate to that feeling of being alone at one point or another. And that's really what the movie's theme is one person who's alone, who is not accepted by his peers, and that's all he wants. He just wants to be accepted. And so there is an aspect of the story there that we can relate to, but because the actual storyline itself is so convoluted, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it. Um,
If I was to recommend somebody watch this movie, honestly, what would have helped me, just if you want to watch it, I would say it's worth watching if you know you kind of like the Asian style or Asian traditional stories, you know, traditional Chinese stuff that sounds interesting to you. But just do yourself a favor and look up, not necessarily of the movie, but look up at least like a summary of the story of
mhm.
Ne Zha before you watch this movie because it'll help a lot.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
just get like the cliff notes basically of Ne Zha before you watch this movie because they're not going to give you time to catch up.
Hmm.
They're not going to give you any time to catch up and figure it out. They're going to throw you right into this. And it's as impressive as it is with the animation, and it is very impressive. The story is deep and it's confusing, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of characters that you're going to kind of just be introduced to in this movie that you're not getting backstory for.
Hmm.
And so, you know, in a movie we're joking around like Kung Fu Panda, but in a movie like Kung Fu Panda, there's a huge amount of character development that goes on to all these characters.
Yeah.
In a movie like Ne Zha, you are just here's a new guy, welcome to the fight, and now he
Yeah,
does this, and he's important, and now here's a new guy, and oh, this person is my brother, or this person is the other side of like the pearl that's in, it's just they throw a lot at you
they
quick.
do. They really do.
So I'm not steering people away from this movie. Look, it's for a younger demographic. It's a
Yeah,
little
you can tell
gross,
even though it's from a different culture, you can absolutely tell it's not meant for our age. It's definitely meant for a
definitely not.
younger.
Definitely meant for a younger audience, but if you want an example of incredible animation from a studio that's
And
not
epic
Pixar,
fights.
and epic fights, the fights were pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Um, give this one a watch. Honestly, give this one a watch. I'm not telling you you're gonna love it. I'm not even telling you you're gonna like it, but I will say that animation wise, just taking it at face value for the quality that
you'll
was
be
put into this
impressed.
movie, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
I wish I had watched it without the English dub voices. I wish I had just taken the subtitles. I think I would have liked it a lot more. Um, but yeah, Ne Zha. So again, Ne Zha is it's NE space ZHA, and that's our Netflix pick for this week. So Impractical Jokers, obviously was on Amazon Prime. Maleficent was on Disney Plus, and then Ne Zha. So Chris, again, the ratings were phenomenal on
yes.
Rotten Tomatoes
I
for
want to
this.
hear what you gave it.
Okay, fair enough. So again, critic score on this one was 88%,
Hmm.
and audience score was 98%, which come on, that's pretty freaking
That's
high. You're telling me
that is very high.
that's high. I think that's too high,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you know the story coming into the movie or not, or whether you're from America or China. I think that's too high. But I I had a hard time getting through the beginning because again, they throw so much at you. And I'm just taking this as a Westerner watching this movie without knowing the story of Ne Zha going into this. This was not really my style of movie either, so it had a lot going against it. If you're thinking about watching this movie, I think I would give this one a for what it is, for an animated kids movie, not like from a Westerner's point of view, I'm going to give this one a 6. I think
Okay.
if you watch this movie with your kids or with your family, you're all going to come away from it being like, what the heck was that? And if your kid is old enough to like understand what's going on or like understand what they're seeing, I think they're still going to be a little bit like, what the heck's going on? This is not a goofy kids movie. This is like, it switches between being a little kids movie and then having like crazy intense fight scenes and
Yeah.
stuff. I'm going to give this one a 6. I think a lot of people are going to come away from this movie going, I didn't understand that. I missed a lot. Who were those people basically? But you got to give this movie some credit for what it is, for the
Hmm.
animation, for how phenomenal that was, and the fight scenes, which were pretty epic, and the characters in it were pretty cool. So this one gets a 6 from me. Definitely not my favorite movie. Not exactly my style of movie. I like animated films. And I even like kind of like kung fu type stories, but this one was a little out there. Story is really hard to follow. So if you go into it, if you do some research before you watch the movie, you know the story a little bit, you might like it a little better. But if you're trying to just sit down and watch something with your kids, you guys are you're gonna be lost. You're gonna be a little bit lost. And if your kids aren't, willing to appreciate the animation and stuff in this movie, which they probably won't, I don't think you're gonna love it. So it gets a 6 from me, a 6 from the common man, and that's exactly what that is. It's just an average person's review of that movie. So, what do you think, Chris? What do you give this one?
Visually, I thought it was stunning. I think the cinematography was great, especially since you're literally creating the set from the ground up for a movie like this. Um, so, that in itself, I think gets huge props from me. The writing wasn't terrible, it just wasn't something that we're used to. And I think there's a couple things that I need to say about that because one, I believe that the writing that we heard in the English dubbed version is not the same, or at least it doesn't have the same connotation or the same meaning behind it as what the original dialogue would have had. And so I think that a lot of the dialogue got changed in order to fit an audience, like a Western audience for Netflix. And so I think that I can almost guarantee you that the scores that it received were before it was on Netflix, before it was dubbed in English.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm
Because
sure.
I didn't. This wasn't on Netflix when I saw the trailer. I saw the trailer like 4 months ago, and I just never watched it because I didn't know how to watch it. I didn't know where I could find it. And so I saw the trailer and I thought it looked incredible. I thought the animation was obviously stunning. So again, the writing I believe was different at the time that it came out, and so I think that Netflix might have done a disservice to the movie in changing the writing to fit us and try and sell it on their platform. Um, I think that the music was really nice. It was beautiful music that kind of helped sell the world, and obviously there's like cultural instruments like the Iru, which if you guys have ever seen uh, Legend of Korra Avatar, the Iru is the instrument at the end in the credits that makes that really beautiful, um, strangely melodic sound. But anyways, my point is that this film is not intended for Western audiences, like we both said. Um, I think that the 98% is way too high. This is not a movie that is like the best movie in the world, and so from an audience's point of view, I think a 98% is saying that it's mind blowing, that this movie deserves Academy Awards. Like you're 2% away from saying that it's the best movie you've ever seen, and I don't think that that's true. Um, I think I think my score is a little skewed because I took classes where I had to learn to appreciate some movies that I just didn't want to appreciate because I'm so steeped in my Western culture. But I took classes where I had to learn how to watch foreign films, a lot of French, a lot of Asian, German films, which are also very strange films. And so I think that I can see the film from, I guess, a different cultural point of view. And so for me, I think 88 is still a little too high as far as like critics, but I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think the movie was strong. I think that it's one of those movies that you probably want to watch more than once. But if you can't get through the first 15 minutes without, questioning whether or not you should be watching this, it's probably not a movie you're going to like. But I think if you can get past that and you can try to see the movie from an analytical point of view, which is probably not something that people want to do, I think you'll appreciate the movie more. Especially if, like Danny said, you can kind of do a little research beforehand. Which, if you have to do all of that in order to try and appreciate the movie, it's probably not a movie that's intended for you as an audience member.
Right.
So,
Right.
and again, this is why I'm saying it's not a movie that's intended for Western audiences. But for those of you who watch anime religiously, if Attack on Titan and Full Metal Alchemist and shows like Dragon Ball Z are your thing, this might actually be a film that kind of fits in your boat, and you might. I think that's where a lot of the audience score comes from, is people who probably grew up on Dragon Ball Z and stories like that, where the fighting
Yeah, you
and,
make
and
a
the strange.
you
Because I
make
mean,
a
like, dude, Dragon Ball Z, like Majin Buu he's made of bubblegum.
right.
But we as an audience, we're like, yeah, sure, like it's this a Saiyan who turns into an ape, like he's gonna save the world, and travel to other dimensions, and we just accept it. I think it's one of those things that
Yeah.
because it's not an anime, we try to see it differently. But I think that this movie is kind of taking that Japanese and Chinese style of art and trying to enhance it. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's a strong movie that I think needs a little appreciation before you watch it. I know that's such a weird thing to say, but
It
yeah,
is. And I think you were spot on. If you have to do all of that before you watch a movie, you're probably not the
right,
intended audience. And I also think you're exactly right in saying that those kind of ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, which again, I'm not an advocate for Rotten Tomatoes. I disagree with those scores a lot,
yeah,
but you make a good point in saying that those scores were pre-Netflix scores. Those were, those are Chinese audiences that are
mm-hmm.
rating this movie. And if you think of, I'd imagine, this is something we're kind of spoiled with in the Western world, is that Hollywood and all the phenomenal movies that come from Hollywood are in English by actors that are speaking English as the primary language. So we get to see the true, as director
Mm-hmm.
intended products of these movies. And I think we take that for granted because there's
Yeah,
not a Hollywood in every country. And so for Asian audiences, it was probably really refreshing to see something animated that well
mm-hmm.
coming out of an Asian studio, a Chinese studio, I'd imagine, where clearly they put in a lot of work to do this, and it turned out, animation-wise, it was phenomenal, and they probably heard it as the directors intended it to be heard. They weren't relying on subtitles that didn't match up with what they were saying, which is going to throw you off the whole movie. Um, so I can see where high scores would come from, but you're right. A 98%, that's basically saying, like you said, this is 2% away from saying there is nothing about this movie that can be
Yeah.
better. I mean, come on, this is not that movie.
No, no, absolutely not. I
This is
think
not
that there's
that movie.
definitely some weaknesses to it.
Yeah,
And I'm saying that there's weaknesses to it regardless of the fact that it's intended for, a different type of audience. Like there's weaknesses to it just from a filmmaking point of view.
yep,
Um,
yep.
Foreign
Fair
or
enough.
not. But
That's it.
you're right. It'd be like watching a movie like Inglorious Bastards, which is already a very strange, convoluted movie. But it'd be like watching it and then hiring other actors who are not as good to speak over the voices. Like it's just going to lessen the quality of the movie. And I think that's really what happened here.
Right. It probably would have made Brad Pitt's character better, but everybody else it would have made much, much worse. But
Right.
we'll save that for another podcast. So that's it. Episode 3, Critic and the Common Man. I can't believe we're already on 3 episodes of
I know.
this. We're having a lot of fun doing it. If you made it this far in the video, please give us a thumbs up or put a comment down below. We really appreciate you guys watching this. We got a couple people who are watching the videos now. There's plenty of content out
Thanks,
there.
Mom.
Yeah, thanks, Mom. We got a lot of stuff to review, but if you want us to review something, if you've got an idea, drop it in the comments. And
Please.
if you're the first one, whoever the first person to comment a decent movie in the comments is, we will review it. So
Yeah.
it's yours for the taking. But if you happen to be watching this and you made it this far, all the way to the end, throw a comment, show us what you want us to review, or tell us what you want us to review in the next one, and we'll do it. But we're gonna keep doing it. We're having a lot of
Yeah.
fun here.
Yeah.
Again, you can find us anywhere you watch or listen to your podcast. So Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. We're all there.
Yeah.
So give it a shot. Find us on Instagram to stay in the link with all our posts. But that's it. That was Impractical Jokers, Maleficent, and Ne Zha. So 3 good movies. Maleficent surprised me. Impractical Jokers is kind of what you expect, and Ne Zha was interesting.
Yes.
You can find Ne Zha on Netflix, Impractical Jokers on Amazon Prime, and Maleficent on Disney Plus. So that's it, man. We'll be back in the theaters watching new movies at some point here.
Yeah,
Hopefully
absolutely.
sooner than later. Hopefully sooner than later. But that's it. You got anything else, Chris, for episode 3?
No, thank you guys for watching. Mom, I love you. And yeah, I mean, let's keep it going. Let's keep. I like the interesting movies, whether they're good or not. Like it's fun to talk about movies that are not good just as much as it is.
Agreed.
You learn a lot. Trying to analyze why a movie didn't work, and why a great movie did work. And so let's all learn together. Let's get the brains going. So
That's it. Cool. Critic and the Common Man, episode 3. We're out of here.
peace.